Arutperumjothi. One day, Vivekananda wanted to borrow a book from the library. So he asked his disciple to get the book for him. The book was so huge in volume. So the disciple got the book for him. And the next day, Vivekananda returned the book through the same disciple to the library and took another new book, which is along the same lines of volume. So he was going through a series and he was trying to read the book. This kept on continuing for 7 to 10 days. After some days, the local librarian who was observing all these things was ready to accept that the Guru Vivekananda was not really reading the books. He thought that he was not even reading anything at all. It was just only an attempt to impress everybody. And he clearly expressed what he was thinking to the disciple. The disciple conveyed the message to Vivekananda. And when he was passing to the library one day, Vivekananda went and met the librarian. He did express that he went through everything in his book and he can ask him any questions, whatever he wants in those books. So the librarian picked a random book, what Vivekananda has borrowed, and opened a page randomly. He asked a question from that page, and Vivekananda was able to answer it. Then he picked another book randomly, and then he opened a page and he asked one more question. So he started seeing Vivekananda answering pretty much every question, and sometimes even with the quotes in the books given. He was impressed by it, and he told him that it was humanly impossible to do that, and how he is able to achieve it. So Vivekananda answered to him that it is possible for everybody to achieve this. And it is simple, and we can observe this by just looking at the kids. The kids who starts learning in the beginning. What happens during that process? They start to read the letters. So with each letters, what they had read, they form words. Slowly from letters to words, they improve. They do it for years and they gain their confidence in it. And the words turns to sentences there. And what happens after that? Sometimes we stop it, but the sentences can be turned to paragraphs. And the paragraphs can be turned to pages. But to do this thing, a purity of mind and unflickering attention is what is required to achieve this. And that is what we are going to see about in today's satsang, is how to concentrate on a particular object, how to get that attention on that object, what are the impediments, what basically stands in our path, which is stopping us from achieving that concentration, and what are the techniques which is being said by Vallalar to achieve that path and to concentrate in a particular object. So the ability to focus that thought on a single object is what we are talking about. So when that happens, the absorption rate automatically increases. Then the beam is steady. This is a continuous process. This is a continuous beam. So instead of us being scattered, it is continuous in here. And it is one pointed, and this is what our consciousness is about. And it's our own property. And to master this attention, there are multiple techniques to get it. And once it's mastered, Success is just a matter of time to achieve in worldly or in spiritual aspects of our life too. So what happens in our kids playing is the snapshot what's in the picture up there. So we as kids have seen or played with magnifying glasses, with which basically focuses the light onto a single point. This is what exactly happens on the mind too. When the mind is drawn towards various different objects, there is dissipation of mental energy in there. This dissipation of mental energy loses the power of mind and it focuses in various different directions. When it focuses in various different directions, the energy is not exactly the same as we see in the rays of light. It's not going to catch fire when the lights are not assimilated in one single point. So when the lights are spread all over, things are not going to work. But at the same time, when those lights are gathered together in one point, then we start fire coming in. In fact, this is what our kids do right now too. I'm not sure about these days. This is what we have done those times, and I see kids doing this thing and playing with it, which is really encouraging. Then working with the video games and stuff like that. So this is what is correlated to the mind, and this impact, this diverse object which we get through the mind and which we get into our process as in the form of noise. How are we going to reduce all these things? And this is what we are going to see in the form of concentration, of how we are going to see, how we are going to continuously focus on one particular object without wavering on here and there, and how we are going to achieve this. And this is what is meditation is about. Meditation is basically concentrating on one single thing, the flow which is being called as referred to as in modern times, but without disruption, continuously. So, but is it easy? Easier said than done. That presents a huge challenge. It's not that easy. We can say multiple signs of not concentrating, which from our daily tasks we can see. We are restless sometimes. We are unable to perform some activities. We have difficulty in achieving a particular task. We make careless mistakes. We miss meetings. We miss deadlines. We are not able to finish tasks in timely manner. All those things are happening because of the lack of concentration. Psychological conditions happen, which interferes in what we are concentrating, includes anxiety. We are so anxious on what's happening everywhere. We sometimes feel depressed. There are lots of stress surrounding us. The emotional trauma which we go through, listening and happening, whatever around us, those things definitely bother us. One might think that multitasking, which is ability to do multiple things at the same time, is getting more. We are being more productive with it, but really that is not the case. Research has said that we actually lose our productivity when we do multiple tasks at the same time. So when the attention is on one single object at a time, we are more productivity, as said by psychologists. In fact, it goes one step ahead, and they say when we shift between different tasks, in that study, it is said that depending on the task, what we are performing, depending on the complexity of the task, what we are switching to, it can take more and more time actually. because when things are unfamiliar, it's going to take more time because that flow is totally lost. And you would have seen in your own experience too, when you are doing stuff between multiple complex items, switching tasks is not easy. It takes lots of time, right? But when we try to concentrate, of course, it's not going to be easy because of all the external factors we have these days. The external factors of the ringtones of the WhatsApp messages, or the instant messages from Instagram or whatever it is, or the mail and the messengers, the multiple messengers, what we have, the platform which enables us to communicate. Those things, what are the impacts of it? And researchers and psychologically, in experimental psychology, there have been lots of journals published about those notifications and what happens during the attention span of those kind of notification. It really interferes us with what we are doing, because it creates irrelevant thoughts for us. Our mind wavers to a different direction from where it is. And overall, in essence, our performance reduce. Whatever we are trying to do, that performance totally reduce. So in a research paper, what they have about cell phone notification and how it basically significantly disrupts the performance of an attention demanding task. It is clearly stated that those are the main interruption in today's life. And you can see this in office, during in meetings. 5 minutes to grab somebody's attention is not an easy thing. You can see people just switching over. It could be directors, could be vice presidents, presidents. You know, they cannot listen to one single person for more than some time. When walking, too, you can see people holding their cell phones, typing it, texting it, doing something else on it. When driving, you can see it. That is the scariest part, is during the driving, cell phone in one hand and steering in one hand. You can see the drunken driving before, how they actually go from one lane to another lane and they come back. It's exactly the same thing. It is scarier to drive sometimes these days, texting and driving at the same time. So just not a life threatening for oneself, but also for to others too. So what are these things doing? So Florida State actually studied the underscores, which underscores that it's not just when texting or attending phone and you're concentrating on something is where the performance is poor. Just the ringtone or the missed call or just that is enough, and it produces exactly the same effect of what we are communicating, of what we are texting, or what somebody is actually attending a call during driving too. It's the same thing. You get a missed call, you get a notification. It actually produces the same effect. Isn't that so? And that is true, because we always, once a notification comes, the next thing which comes to our mind is it this person? Because we want something to happen. And is that happening? Or due to fear, oh, has that happened? So lots of things, right? Even though that small ringtone comes in, even if it's for a short duration, that actually takes our attention from us. And that is true. And that actually happens every single time. And you can try with your own experience and see for yourself how different it is without being notified. Even though they help us, the technology does help us, providing us all these means to communicate and to make the best of it. But when the technology is driving us instead of us driving the technology, it is a different story. So this is what happens when machines are driving and we are basically are being driven by the technology, right? We let the technology drive it, then it is going to happen. That's exactly what is happening in the mind driving us instead of our will and ourselves driving the mind. This can be easily correlated. Lack of sleep. We are busy these days, lots of entertainments, lots of things to catch up with, lots of innovations, lots of things we have to handle. And what happens? We basically have to watch all those things, keep us engaged with all those things, because engagement is what the technology seeks. How much engaged are we in it? And we get deprived of sleep. And once we get deprived of sleep, we can't concentrate there either. It can happen when we have medical issues, when we are not healthy, we cannot concentrate. How can we concentrate when somebody is not healthy, when a dear or somebody near to us is not healthy? It presents a big challenge for us too. So there are lots of things which are in stake in here, which are in place in here. So one day, a yogi and a disciple walked to a big city. They are new to the city. They don't have any money. They don't know where to stay. They don't have a place to eat. The disciple was worried. He said, are we going to find a big park and stay there? And maybe we have to beg for food that night. The yogi smiled and said, today we are going to eat in a hotel and probably sleep in the hotel too. The disciple was amazed and he said, how are we going to pay? We don't have any money for it. So they walked and sometimes they rested. And when they rested, the yogi was doing his meditation. He was concentrating in such efforts. And then they started walking. They walked and walked. And finally, they entered into a hotel. When they entered, they saw a well-dressed gentleman walking towards them, who introduced himself as the manager. And he said, oh, you both look like Swamis, and I'm sure you probably don't have good place to stay. I can offer you food and also place to stay. In exchange, you got to work in the kitchen. So they agreed. And the student was in shock, like what magic is happening here and how is this thing happening? The yogi smiled and said, I wanted to know how thought works. This is the power of thought. And when you think with your full concentration that something is going to happen and the mind does not resist that thought process, your thought process materializes and it becomes true. நீ எதுவாக நினைக்கின்றாயோ அதுவாகவே மாறுவாய், right? It's the same thing. So our thought is who we are. What we think is what we are going to be. It's one and the same. The secret is concentrating, visualizing, seeing the details, having faith in it, and projecting the mental and the emotional energy into the mental scene. And when the mind is empty from thoughts, and when one single thought is allowed for continuous time, it gains more power. And when that single thought is entering and it gets more power, one should be very careful too, because that thought process, through it, it's a concentrated thought process and it has a greater influence of oneself, which could be used as a constructive mechanism, or it can go otherwise too. So that is why at that point of time, things have to be very carefully done, because that thought has lots of power in it. But that thought, which is arising from mind learns from the sense organs. It's not a gross thing. It's not visible. It's not tangible. You cannot measure it. Its magnitude is unknown. It doesn't require a space. It's a subtle matter which cannot be exactly said. It's a subtle matter. It takes multiple forms. It thinks. It discriminates. It is storing stuff for us. It is self-arrogant, which is the ego. Sometimes it is restless in a tamasic state. Sometimes it's preoccupied with some time. Sometimes it stays in just one point of time. But what happens in here? It's the same thing like how one person is. One person as a family man, he goes to office, plays the role of banker. He goes to a home association or to a bankers association. He plays a roles of a treasury or a secretary there. Then comes home, again he is a family man. He plays different role, but it's all one and the same. It's the same person who has been going back and forth and playing different roles. But mind is a bundle of habits. It's a collection of desires arising from the contact from different objects through senses. This is exactly all Vedanta, Siddhanta, Perumal, or everybody is saying. So from all these objects, through the sense objects, we gather all those information. Those are the inputs to the mind. It's a collection of feelings aroused by all these worldly objects. Through the vision, we see stuff, we get the knowledge from it. We gather multiple ideas, we hear from lots of things through our ear. And technology is definitely helping us in one way or the other. Every minute it changes colors, it changes its shape. We can just keep switching over to multiple different things we want from all these objects, through eye, through ear. All these sense objects are providing information to our mind. And the main important thing is it generates thoughts through those senses. And our activities are based on these thoughts. So the point at which we can control is consciously controlling the point where the thought enters through our senses. Because that is what is getting stored in our memory too. That's another function of mind. Manam, Sittam, Buddhi, Agangaram. It gets stored too. So that thought has to be pure, has to be consciously controlled when entering in through the senses. So the modifications of mind is happening when the thought is entering in, when different thoughts are entered. And if it's not conscious and if it's not goal-oriented, then it presents a problem for us. Because at the time, what happens is, it is not who driving it, it is the mind driving and giving us all the information, just giving us to everything, and then it already got in and we are trying to process it after something else happened, after the thought had turned into an activity. It had already manifested itself. So that is a little bit late. And what happens here with this thoughts and memory? we inherit all these different kind of thoughts in here, thoughts of jealousy, thoughts of attachments to it, lust, anger, selfishness, likes, dislikes, all those things get into our mind. And it's easier to put a gate on something before entering in and then to do the cleanup process, because the modification of the mind had already gone. It had already undergoing those phases by enjoying the charm in the world, and it gets attracted towards it. And when it gets attracted towards it, it has a tough time focusing on oneself, because a mind is our own friend. It's our friend when it listens to it. When it listens to the will, when it listens to us, it's our friend. But it's not our friend, and it's our own enemy when it's not listening, and it puts us in trouble. We are in a trouble because it does something, because we have got all those inputs and we started doing something which is attracted towards the worldly object, and that puts in trouble. That is our own enemy. So mind becomes our own enemy and our own friend then. So when thinking through it, this basically form cloudiness. The objects outside us, what we are getting as input, forms cloudiness, and it's just looking like in a glass. Like when we are not able to see something clearly, when the water is murky, when things are not clear, fog in there, it's not visible. But when you are short-sighted or when you are long-sighted, you can see the difference. And when you wear your glass, how clear things are. That is what exactly happens. Depending on all these characters, whatever we call as Maya, ignorance, whatever the name it is, different names for it, but it's all one and the same. The characters which we get. So once all those things are gone, then clarity comes in. It is like clarity once we see, when we are not able to see something, and when things are very clear, and you wear that, first time you wear that glass in and you get that clarity, that's what it is about. So the more all those characters in, it is more unclear, and the less it is, the less foggy it is, the less murky it is getting better, and eventually it will be pure. And Vallal Perumanar says, I have to let go of all these things to be in a state like this. It is like we gain more knowledge, more bliss, and more power when we give up something to achieve a higher goal. In terms of spirituality, that is how it goes. But the same thing gets applied to this worldly process too, in terms of concentration. It's all one and the same. We can actually infer from what Perumanar is saying, and that could be applied to the world, and it definitely works. So how do we tune this mind? Right now, this mind is all over the place. How could that be tuned? How could we make it? It is like a sculpture. It's like the idol which we worship. It has to go through that process. It has to go through that process of tuning itself, and it might be painful. It's not easy. It takes time. So that is what tuning is about. But based on it, the results are evident, and we'll be able to see the success once we are able to concentrate, and once we have the flow going untouched into one thing. So Perumanar Arutperumjothi clearly tells, when attention gets diverted, drag your attention and pull it back in Sitchabai so you can focus. This is what Swamy Nagarajaya was referring to in the meditation technique, what we are doing. So when attention is getting out of control, when we are not able to do it, in our Sitchabai, which is our Sutha Sanmarga meditational practice, you got to drag the attention and keep it in one point in focus, in that particular point specifically. But that's the same thing in the worldly affairs too. When we are not able to concentrate on what we are doing, and when concentration gets diverted, we got to focus in one place. But the challenge is something else there. So in 15 hours, 16 hours a day, what we are doing is we are distracted for most of the time. And what happens? 16 hours a day, we are distracted. We practice distraction for most of the time. And we want to practice a meditation or some other work. We want to concentrate for 30 minutes or for an hour. Is that going to work? Because what we are good is in what we have really practiced, and what we have really practiced is distraction. So we are good in that. So that is what is going to work. So we are not able to focus our full attention there. So what can we do about that? Is a pretty simple process through which we give our complete attention to our family, to our spouse. When they are saying something, not watching TV or not, being in the laptop or in the phone or doing something, let's give the complete attention to them. Let's listen to them completely, what they are really saying. Let's try to observe it. And to the kids too. What are the kids saying to us? And from kids to parents too. And to grandparents. So in everyday life, we got to actually keep doing it. On every single thing we do, we eat, we just focus on only eating. We take bath, we just focus on bathing only. You read something, we just only read it. So we do multiple things, but we want to do only that particular thing. That's what we are trying to do in here. And when the attention gets focused, we try to bring it back and put it in one place. So the second one, there are multiple techniques which Perumal says in disciplining mind, and we have picked some important techniques. Is finding fault with others, avoiding all negativity. What happens here is we are always attracted towards negativity. And this is basically a strategy for the business and lots of people these days to gather attention is to, throw out negativity and people look into it. If you say something positive, very less people want to listen to it because that's the nature of the mind. It gets easily attracted to it. But what happens there? We are wasting energy, focusing on all those things. Everybody has negativity in it, but we don't want to drill in it. These negative emotions drain our energy. And we have to take charge over it by looking at the positivity of it and not let the negativity drive us. If it drives us, it will be filled with nothing but hatred, jealousy, and we will not be able to concentrate. We will not be able to get things done successfully there. So that is why negativity is also not a good thing. But it's going to be challenging because mind really loves negativity. It really loves the gossip. You try to gossip about something, it's like feeding it. So when you say that to the mind that I'm not doing it, it's going to put a big fight on you. But this is how it has to be done. This is the way it has to be tuned slowly. It's not going to happen in a day. It's going to put a good fight for sure. And you can then see like, oh, this is what it loves basically, because we got, it is habitual. We got it from all the habits and all those things, what we have accumulated. And slowly, we are trying to get into this phase of clearing off all these stuff, of all these characters, what we have accumulated in the past. That's what we are trying to do. That circle, what we saw in the picture there. Then do not get angry with others, but show frustration in one's own characters. I mean, get frustrated on myself. I want to get frustrated when I started getting angry, or any other character. I want to be frustrated on myself. Like, why am I not able to do that thing? Introspect it. And get sattvic character, because sattvic is purity, sattvic is knowledge. Sattvic is what is harmony is about. That is the goodness and joy, the satisfaction. It is free of fear, anger, and violence. That is what a sattvic mind is, a steady mind, a calm mind. It's not like a beach with waves, but it's like a lake with no ripples, perfectly clear, where you can see the bottom. At that time, we can analyze any situation after weighing and give the right response to it, and not react to that situation emotionally. So that is the quality of sattvic mind. So that is where we have to be. We have to acquire that knowledge of being sattvic character, the good characters which we have to acquire. And that comes by practice too. Sense control. So we knew that mind basically is getting all this information. The input of mind is nothing but senses. And that is why the sense control and controlling every sense actually is important. So we really want to hear what we really want it to be. And every situation is different. When one feels that this is not good for them, it is up to that person to see how they can control through one of those senses and to avoid it. And Perumal in the sense control for hearing, he says like, hear what you really needed. And it could be whatever your focus is on, or whatever is associated with that goal, the worldly goal. You're trying to do a project or a research only in that particular thing. Just hear that, do divine chanting, don't hear anything outside of it. And he says, you also talk courteous. You want to be courteous to others too, because compassion is what drives pretty much the whole thing. And love. And this thing we can see it pretty clearly because in nature people are talented in something, and when there is love for that, things automatically happens. We don't have to put so much energy to get something done. So that's why when students are studying something, what they're really interested in or what they really love it, or even like people they work on which they really love, they can easily get success in it. For instance, when they're building Taj Mahal, right? We go and ask a person who is one of the construction workers. That person might say, oh, I'm working because if I don't work, I don't get paid. And another person you can ask, and that person might say, oh, you know what, I am working because if I do not work, my boss is looking at me and it's going to be a problem. I might be fired. You might ask one another person, and he can say that, oh, we are going to build I'm building one of the biggest wonders of the world. It's going to be the wonder of the world. So that is the difference actually. What happens when we love something is the thought process totally changes. The thought process is not narrowly focused. It is so broad. So automatically we'll be focused in it and attention flows in. So that is why when we love something or when we develop the love on something, we'll be successful in it. Okay, next one is the fruit of action. This one we can see with non-profit organizations like Vallalar Mission or anybody else. We can see the amount of work they do with no stress at all. It just comes. The flow just comes in because their fruit of action is not on them. It's not to be popular or not to get. It's not to be popular or not for their one's own fame. They dedicate it to a different cause. They dedicated it to Arutperumjothi. They dedicated it to God. So when people are involved, when social activities, when social need or social organizations, when they do it, when people do it, things start to flow in a little bit better manner because this is another, actually, you want to say like a shortcut is basically dedicating that action to a higher cause will help focus on the task, what we are doing. The task automatically gets better because there is no personal influence or emotions out there. All those things are focused on something else. So we are diverting it. So that is another good technique. And we can see that thing happen. We can see with so many stuff what they are doing. And, you know, when we have a problem to do something, you can see people from the non-profit organization or even Vallalar mission, they just do it at ease. They're like, okay, that's not a problem. You know, they just are so relaxed and they just handle it. They just concentrate on what they want to concentrate. So we can learn from them. Meditation. Oh, we cannot, without meditation, there's no concentration. And concentration is nothing but one. What is meditation? It's just one thought, continuously, concentration. That is what it is. So when withdrawal of sense, pratyagara, in Patanjali Yoga, when withdrawal of sense happens, when withdrawal of sense not happens, when it ends, that is when concentration actually begins, which is your dharana. And when the concentration ends, that is when your dhyana starts. So that concentration, that end of concentration is where meditation is really even starting, is that continuous flow. That end of that is where it starts. So that is why Perumal has given meditation, Sutha Sanmarga meditation. And Perumal says that you got to practice it. Once you get up right from the bed, you do it. After your breakfast, you do it. After lunch, you do it. After your dinner, you do it. Before going to bed, you do it. It's a continuous process, which Perumal is saying. And he has given the object of light which we have to visualize in the eyebrow center as God's grace, and repeat the mantra of Arutperumjothi without moving the tongue, by showing compassion and love to God. So that is another technique which can help. Last but not the least, food. Pure sattvic food. It plays a role. It depends on what food we eat. We are inheriting characters from it. We want to eat biryani and all those things. We cannot meditate, if the stomach is full. Just feel like sleeping. It gets the tamasic characters inside us. So food plays a role in it, a role in a character. That's what we have to understand here. It impacts our concentration. So Perumal also says Thoothuvalai, which is called Solanum trilobatum. So this Solanum trilobatum is what Perumal says, which helps us focus, which makes our mind calm and brings stress. It relieves stress, makes our mind calm. So relieving stress is a big thing these days. There are lots of depression tablets which people are eating, and there are lots of things which is happening medically too. But there is something which can also relieve stress through herbs too, and helps us focus on concentration. But it does also have other features, like it loosens up the phlegm. It actually helps our respiratory tract too, this Thoothuvalai herb. It's a vine type which has thorns in the leaves. It's a wonderful herb which we can try too. So there are multiple techniques which we can use and get our focus back so we can concentrate and be success in our life too. And Perumal says in Gnanasariyai, Kandadellam Anithiyame, Ketadellam Palude, Katradellam Poye, Nivi Kalitadellam Vine, Undadellam Malame, Utkondadellam Kuraye. So if garbage is coming in, garbage is what's going to go out. It's going to go out. Garbage in, garbage out, if you have heard of that. So with that, we can wrap this session up. It's already time in there, but just think over it. The concept is simple, but practice is what makes it realize it. So the picture, what we had before, I think, let's see it one more time before we go back. How the sense organs are there, how thoughts and memory gets from it, and we frame this characters around all those things, and how we can be clear when we get rid of likes, dislikes, jealousy, attachment, lust, anger, selfishness, and stuff.